Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today I want to start with some really, really good news, and then I want to talk a little bit about how we've got into this dreadful mess we're in. And at the end, if you can stick with it, I'll tell you about my April Fool's joke, which seems to have worked pretty well, and surprisingly well, in fact. So the good news, well, the really, really good news is this: is that after the last 2 years or so, we have managed finally to sign up to the CPTPP. This was announced by Kemi Badenoch, the business secretary, yesterday. And, well, this is wonderful because CPTPP are a group of 11 countries. They're all based around the Pacific. In fact, most of them are actually about as far away as it's possible to go, but we're going to be part of this trade group. So we've left the EU, which is a group of 27 countries, 22 miles away, where the richest and most successful group of countries in the world. But now we're joining CPTP. Everything is going to be absolutely fine. You know, I've said before, and I often said that every big business in the country, in the world, began as a small business, began as a startup. And when you're starting a business, you want every help you can get in order to grow. And in particular, once you start growing, you want to be able to export, which is why it was great having Europe on our doorstep. I know from my own experience when I used to supply customers all over Northern Europe, I used to go to some pancras, get on the train, and within 2 or 3 hours I was in Paris or Brussels or Amsterdam and seeing customers, and you'd take orders and you'd send them back to the warehouse. They'd be delivered within before you even left, they'd be delivered. And there was no paperwork at all, and it was extremely easy, and it was very easy to build up trade and to keep in touch with your customers all the time and so on. And this was really, but of course, this had to end. It had to end because, as we know, the Europeans kept bossing us around, and they kept coming here and taking our jobs, working in our hospitals and digging our vegetables. So we had to put a stop to all that. And so now that is no longer possible because customers all over Europe would just say we're just not prepared to do the paperwork. And so we're going to instead deal with a CPTPP. Now, I'm not sure if you're a small company, and I don't know what you're a small business and you want to export, if you're, I don't know, if you're making furniture or jam or something or whatever. Well, I don't know what we make these days. But anyway, suppose you want to. I presume the way it's going to work now is that you would book a flight to Santiago in Chile, perhaps, for example, and you go there and you'd look around, see if you can find some customers. You might take the bus down to Tierra del Fuego or up to Atacama or something, and you might pick up a few orders, and then you might say to yourself, well, since I'm in the southern hemisphere, I'll pop over to New Zealand, and you might go over there and see if you can get a few orders there, and then you come back, and that would all cost you thousands and thousands of pounds, and then you send the orders off to your customers, your new customers in these far-flung places, and the customers wouldn't want to wait 2 months for the goods to be delivered by sea, so they want them sent by air. So you'd send them by air, which would all help. I mean, this is going to really, really help global warming, sending all these goods to and fro to these countries far away by air. And I'm guessing that's how it's going to work. Now, the really good news about this, which Kemi Badenoch confirmed yesterday, is that having lost 4 or 5% of our GDP, having left the EU, in 10 years' time, this new deal with CPTPP could increase, if it all goes well, could increase our GDP by 0.08%. To put that into context, if you've got £100 in your pocket and somebody gives you another 80p, it's not really a game changer, is it? It doesn't make an awful lot of difference. But anyway, that's the future, and well, very exciting news. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how it is we've got into such a mess. And there are certain obvious reasons, such as having a prime minister who's dishonest and selfish and self-obsessed and absolute charlatan, which hasn't helped. Indeed, there's an organisation. It's called the UK Constitutional Monitoring Group, and it's a group of a whole busload of professors who twice yearly produce a report on the Constitution and how things are going and how the government's behaving and so on. And in the latest report, which came out last week, they found 90 cases where they said constitutional norms had been degraded. In other words, where the government had fallen short. And I started looking at the fact that the economy's in such a state, and so many other problems. The NHS with 7 million in the waiting list, and all the problem with the police and chaos, and crime is soaring at the moment, and all these other scandals and all these other problems, and lack of inward investment and so on. I thought really there must be something wrong with a system that provides us with a government that is allowed to or is able to preside over such decline and such chaos. And I thought a lot about this and about how we elect our governments and so on. I think that has a lot to do with it. And I think things have changed over the years. And I think one thing that's changed a lot is that we're now living in this age of social media, where it's how you appear on camera that matters an awful lot, which is why people like Farage and Johnson and Trump rise to the top, because they're very good performers, because people, generally speaking, are not very interested in politics. And you need to grab people's attention with catchphrases, get Brexit done and build back better and all this stuff. It's all going to be simplified because we've all got so much entertainment coming at us right, left and centre via our phones and our televisions and so on, and it's very difficult to get anyone interested in politics, and a lot of people are just simply not interested. But the other problem is, the big problem we've got in this country, which is exceptionally here, is that we have this voting system, this first by the post, which is totally out of date. It's a completely crazy system, whereby the majority of constituencies throughout the land are safe seats. I, for example, live in a seat which is absolutely safe. It's been safe for years, and I know who my MP is. I know who he will be. Next time it'll be the same guy, and I've voted every time in the last 30 years that there's been a general election, and I've known every time that my vote was a complete waste of time, because I know who's going to win. And that applies to the majority of constituencies throughout the land. So what happens is that you get marginal constituencies who decide who's going to be the government, in effect. And so that's why you get this concentration of effort by the political parties at the time of an election on these marginal seats. And as happened in the last election, it was the so-called rebel seats that kind of swung it, or certainly helped to swing the election. And so politicians really have to focus on those marginal seats, and very often, such as with the rebel seats, many of them are sort of deprived areas. Their populations are not necessarily particularly well educated, almost certainly not very interested in politics. They probably get most of their political information from the Daily Express and the Daily Mail and so on. And those are the people that politicians have to target. And you can be absolutely sure at the next election, Starmer and Sunak and all the cabinet, the shadow cabinet, they'll all be focusing on these seats, and to hell with all the other constituencies, because they're all foregone conclusions. And so the people who decide who's going to be the government are people in marginal seats, and that's a crazy system. There are other problems as well. For example, as happened when Johnson was deposed, when a prime minister. I mean, when you vote in a general election, you're voting. The leader of whichever party wins is going to be the prime minister. So you're voting for a prime minister as well as for a party. But when you vote for, when a prime minister stands down or dies or whatever, or is forced out, the replacement, the next prime minister, is decided amongst the members of that particular prime minister's party. And so we had last time when Johnson went, we had 270-odd thousand or 170,000 old people, mostly old people, members of the Conservative Party, deciding on who would be our next Prime Minister. And we ended up with Truss, and we know what happened there, and now we've got Sunak, who was the second choice. And that's no way to choose a leader. It's just not very democratic. And the other thing, of course, is the House of Lords. The House of Lords is absolutely nuts. It's entirely appointed. It's appointed principally by the Prime Minister of the day. And a remarkable thing I found out the other day is that of the 850 members of the House of Lords, probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, government house anywhere, certainly in Europe and probably in the world, 850 members, of whom 87, that's more than 10%, have been appointed by Boris Johnson, by the former discredited Prime Minister. And amongst those who he appointed are his brother and his friend Zach Goldsmith, Ian Botham, the cricketer, and and Lord Lebedev of Siberia. I mean, what sort of a system is it that the Prime Minister appoints people who are going to be in government? And so I think until we sort some of these things out, as far as first past the post is concerned, the Conservatives are never going to vote for a change, because they've done very well out of it. They've won so many elections. In fact, they've been the main party in government for a very, very long time, 100 years, I suppose. And as far as Labour is concerned, they had a vote at their conference last September, and they voted overwhelmingly to replace first past the post with some form of proportional representation, as happens everywhere else, just about. And Starmer said no, he didn't want it. He said it was not a priority, when in fact it clearly is an absolute priority. But there you go. And so we find ourselves in this mess, with the government really not having much idea what to do, apart from talk a lot of nonsense about us being the fastest growing economy in the G7 and all this rubbish, and the fastest vaccine rollout and so on. And so, not knowing what to do, they have to do what fascist governments always do, and that is they have to find somebody to blame, someone to victimise for all this. And what has been very convenient is the asylum seekers. And so the focus of the government, as we know, is as Sunak has said himself, is his number one priority. We know that the crazy psychopathic nutcase Braverman, she it's her obsession, it's her dream to be able to punish these people by sending them all to Africa and dumping them there. But as long as we've got these asylum seekers coming here across the channel, because there's no safe route, as long as they keep coming, and as long as they are kept idle doing nothing, the cost is building up all the time. And when approaching the next election, when approaching the rebel seats, the Tories are going to be saying, well, we're tougher on immigrants, and Labour presumably going to have to go along behind, being not quite so tough, but being tough as well, because that's what the voters like. Indeed, I think a lot of these voters in these rebel seats or these marginal seats, I think if you said you were going to bring back hanging, you'd probably be swept back into office. But anyway, so the asylum seekers are the ones that are being victimised. And I've said before about these asylum seekers. You know, if you leave a country, you leave Iran or Afghanistan or Eritrea, one of these terrible countries, you might well be in serious danger, and you go through this arduous, difficult, dangerous journey getting to the UK. You're not somebody who wants to sit down and do nothing. You're somebody you're probably quite well educated. You're somebody who's got a lot of determination, a lot of ambition, and all you really want to do is to work. And you know that eventually, well, perhaps not now, but previously, you know that eventually you'll be granted asylum. But instead of using these people, instead of allowing these people to work and to earn money and to contribute and to be net contributors to the economy, no. They have to sit in rooms, in so-called hotels for 18 months, doing nothing. Just so that the government can say, look at all these people, look, they're costing us £6 million a day. Look at all this trouble, we're going to have to get rid of them. It's really stupid. And, you know, amongst these 160,000 people who are apparently now sitting around waiting for a decision from the Home Office, which might come this year, next year, who knows when, there are probably doctors, and there are probably nurses, there are probably care workers, and almost certainly the vast majority, if not all of them, would be absolutely delighted to go out and work and do anything to contribute and to actually make some money. But no, they're a better target if we keep them doing absolutely nothing. And with that sort of attitude and this total lack of control of anything, the fact that everything is, as I say, everything is so much in decline and falling to pieces, it's really quite worrying. And I've just got two warnings one of which I mentioned several times before. The first is the question of the food shortages, because at some stage legally we have to impose import controls on goods coming to this country. Right now, any goods coming to the UK from Europe just come straight through Dover and no controls. We have to impose controls, and that will deter a lot of food exporters from Europe from sending food to the UK. So we're going to have much bigger and more serious food shortages are increasing food prices coming in due course, and who knows when, but it can't be delayed much longer. The other problem is this, that with the situation as it is, with a declining economy and many people just not being able to make ends meet, is that a lot of people are going to start resorting to crime. We know it's already happening. There's already a bit of a crime wave going on, and it's just such an easy option, an easy way out for so many people, because frankly the chances of you getting caught if you commit a crime now are so low, and clear-up rates are tiny, and people are just going to be forced into it. And so I think that's something else we should be quite worried about. And so on that cheerful note, I'll not depress you any further. I would just like to say a couple of things. First off, as I said, this is my 100th video. I've never asked for any money, and I'm not going to ask for any money. I'm always very, very grateful when occasionally people give me some money on the super thanks and so on. But I do have one favour to ask you, and that is this. I would like to make more videos, and I'd like to do some excuse me. I'd like to do some interviews and so on, and try and expand the channel a little bit. But I do need more subscribers. So if you know of anybody you think might be interested in what I've got to say, or might be prepared to subscribe, I really would appreciate it if you'd recommend this channel. The other thing is, I haven't mentioned for some time, but I do still have a few copies of my little book, a little souvenir of the Madness of Brexit, which is still available. It's available on my website at ml44.com. I'll leave a link down below. So finally, let me tell you about my April Fool's joke, which wasn't really meant to be an April Fool's joke, but it was, I thought, quite funny. I have a Twitter account. It's Michael Lambert A with Michael Lamberta, and I'll leave a link at the bottom. But I use this Twitter account to make sort of sarcastic tweets, really, most to try and mock politicians, and just I don't make any serious contributions. It's all just fun, really. And I heard the other day that Suella Braverman was going to go after beggars. They want to stop begging, apparently. And so I put up a tweet about 3 days ago. It wasn't meant to be an April Fool's tweet, but since it's April the 1st today, I thought I'd read it to you. And what I said was this. I said, breaking news. Suella Braverman plans to announce new fines of up to £1,000 for begging. Now, I thought it was a bit silly, really. It was just for fun. And I thought, the idea of finding a beggar, somebody who's sat on the pavement with a paper cup full of £2 or £3, to fine them would be absolutely absurd. And I didn't think anyone would take it seriously. But the really funny joke is that in 3.5 days, it's been viewed 8.2 million times. Isn't that odd? Anyway, that's it, really. If you watch this far, thank you very much indeed. And, well, until next time, bye for now.